So on June 30th, 2026, Anthropic published what I think will turn out to be one of the most consequential AI safety blog posts of the year. Not because of the technical details though, those are worth understanding, but because of the broader context. The Fable 5 export ban became one of the biggest stories in AI this year, driving conversations around open source, AI sovereignty, model security, and the role cybersecurity plays in AI governance. But buried inside the announcement that Fable 5 was being redeployed was something practitioners should pay close attention to. Anthropic proposed a consensus industry framework for scoring the severity of AI jailbreaks, explicitly modeled on the common vulnerability scoring system that we use in traditional software security. They're drafting it along Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Glasswing partners as well. This is a significant development, not because the idea is new, but because it signals that the frontier labs have reached the same conclusion the vulnerability management community reached years ago, even if it took an export ban and a societal firestorm to get there. When you have a class of security problem that will never be fully solved, you need a standardized way to talk about the severity so organizations can prioritize their response. The cybersecurity industry spent 2 decades learning that lesson with software vulnerabilities. The AI safety community is now compressing that same realization into months. For practitioners coming from traditional security, jailbreaks are best understood as the AI equivalent of vulnerability exploitation. Every frontier AI model ships with safety training and behavioral constraints designed to prevent it from producing harmful outputs. A jailbreak is any technique that bypasses those constraints and gets the model to do something it was designed to refuse. The techniques range from simple to sophisticated. Some involve creative prompt engineering, rewording a dangerous request in a language that slips past the model's safety training. Others use multi-turn conversations that gradually shift the model's context until it complies with requests it would have initially refused. More advanced methods involve encoding harmful instructions in ways the model processes, but its safety system does not catch. It can also occur by exploiting the gap between what the model was trained to refuse and what it actually refuses in practice. Some methods are direct, with users entering text inputs to the LLM, while others are indirect, via content that makes its way into the model's context through retrieval, tool outputs, or other channels. Google DeepMind's recent AI Agent Traps paper is an excellent resource on this indirect attack surface. Prompt injection, which encompasses jailbreaking as a technique, has held the #1 position in the OWASP top 10 for large language model applications in both the 2023 and 2025 editions. That is not a ranking driven by theoretical concern. It reflects the assessment of hundreds of security professionals that manipulating LLMs into bypassing their intended constraints is the single most significant risk facing AI deployments today. The fact that it has held the top spot across 2 editions, despite massive investment in mitigations by every frontier lab, tells you something about how persistent the problem is. Jailbreaks matter operationally because they are what triggered the Fable 5 export controls in the first place. Amazon researchers found a method to bypass Fable 5 safeguards, prompting it to identify software vulnerabilities and produce exploitation code. The government's concern was straightforward. If a frontier model can be jailbroken into producing offensive cyber capabilities, that represents a national security risk. The result was an immediate export control ban on June 12th. What made the situation more complicated and what I covered in the Friendly Fire piece was Anthropic's own testing showed that many less capable models, including Opus 4.8, GPT 5.5, Kimi K2.7, and even Haiku 4.5, could reproduce the exact same behavior. Katie Masouras has discussed this aspect of the report on the 3Buddy Problem podcast, and the conclusion was consistent. This was a borderline case involving routine defensive cybersecurity work, not a unique offensive capability. The primary defense against jailbreaks in production AI systems is a set of mechanisms called classifiers. These are small, automated AI systems that run alongside the main model during interactions, monitoring for potentially harmful requests or outputs. When a classifier detects that a conversation is heading towards a dangerous territory, it intervenes and blocks the response. For practitioners, the simplest way to think about this is content-aware firewalls, sitting between the user and the model's full capabilities. It is not the model choosing not to answer, it is a separate system making a real-time judgment call about whether a given interaction should be allowed. Anthropic uses what they call constitutional classifiers. Rather than relying on block lists of known jailbreak strings, they train classifiers on written constitutions. Natural language rules defining what the system should allow, block, and consider harmful. The classifier acts as a second line of defense. Even if the base model could be manipulated, the classifier can flag the input or output before it reaches the user. Anthropic describes this as a defense in depth, multiple safety mechanisms layered together. Some involve training the model itself to decline harmful requests, others involve retroactive pattern analysis across conversations. The classifiers operate on a safety margin principle deliberately set to trigger on requests that might be benign but carry some probability of being harmful. A request must look very clearly safe to avoid triggering the classifier. For Fable 5, Anthropic made that safety margin much larger than any prior launch. More benign requests get incorrectly blocked. More routine cybersecurity work gets flagged. It was a deliberate trade-off. Accept more false positive for stronger guarantees that harmful requests never get through. After the Amazon report, they trained an improved classifier that blocks the specific reported technique in over 99% of cases, which NIST team independently verified as well. Their next generation system, Constitutional Classifiers Plus, reduced jailbreak success rates from 86% down to around 4.4%. Over 1,700 cumulative hours of red teaming across 198,000 attempts. Only one high-risk vulnerability was discovered and no universal jailbreak was found. The false refusal rate dropped from 0.38% to 0.05%, while computational overhead went from 23.7% down to roughly 1%. But the important thing for practitioners to understand is that classifiers are not perfect, and they never will be. They reduce the probability of a successful jailbreak, but cannot eliminate it. This is not an engineering limitation that better classifiers will eventually overcome. It's a structural property of the problem itself. And I want to flag something from the practitioner side. Many cyber professionals and researchers have voiced frustration with the classifiers, arguing they prevent legitimate defensive and research work. Even while researching the topic, I was using Fable 5 and the classifier triggered on a straightforward query about LLM jailbreaks and reverted me to Opus 4.8. You can see how even trivial, genuine research bumps into these guardrails. I've written about this dynamic extensively, especially in the context of agentic AI and the fact that probabilistic controls, often called soft guardrails, are inherently imperfect. In the age of agents, where rather than just inputs and outputs, AI takes actions, we need hard boundaries to manage the significantly greater risk that agents introduce. Anthropic states this explicitly. It is probably impossible to make any AI model fully robust to jailbreaks. They are not alone. OpenAI has made similar acknowledgments, and in June 2026, NIST put mathematical rigor behind the claim. NIST senior scientist Apostle Vasilev published a peer-reviewed proof in IEEE Security and Privacy that formally extends Gödel's incompleteness theorems to AI guardrail systems. The Cloud Security Alliance published a research note analyzing the implications, and the conclusion is stark. No finite set of AI guardrails can be universally robust against adversarial prompts. This is not a gap that better engineering will close. It's a mathematical property. The fundamental problem is simple. There are infinite ways to ask for the same thing in natural language. You can rephrase, use analogies, speak in hypotheticals, encode instructions, or bury the real request inside something that looks harmless. Safety filters are built from finite rule sets, and finite rules cannot cover infinite variations. NIST proof formalized what practitioners already suspected. No matter how many rules you add, there will always be some way to phrase a request that slips through. If you want to go deeper on the empirical research, a paper titled Evaluating Jailbreak Guardrails for LLMs provides an excellent synthesis of current knowledge, including a common taxonomy for discussing jailbreak techniques. For anyone who has worked in application security, this should sound familiar. The industry reached the same conclusion about SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and every other injection class. You can reduce the attack surface dramatically. You can make exploitation harder, but you cannot always eliminate the category entirely. The difference with prompt injection is that the input language is natural language itself, which makes the boundary between legitimate use and adversarial manipulation fundamentally harder to define than it is for structured query languages. The OWASP Top 10 for LLM applications reinforces this from the practitioner side. Prompt injection has held the #1 position across both editions, and OWASP guidance notes that it is unclear if there are foolproof methods to prevent this due to the stochastic nature of Gen AI. We long ago accepted that software will always have vulnerabilities, but we did not throw up our hands. We built systems for discovering, scoring, prioritizing, and remediating them. The AI safety community is now reaching the same inflection point with jailbreaks, and this is where the CVSS comparison becomes relevant. Anthropic's proposed framework evaluates jailbreaks on 4 criteria. Let me walk through each one. First, capability gain. How far beyond the existing tools does a jailbreak take the user? If weaker, widely available models can already reach the same capability, the score is low. If the jailbreak unlocks something that significantly accelerates even domain experts, the score is high. This is directly relevant to Fable. The Amazon jailbreak scored low here because Haiku 4.5 could reproduce the same output. Second, breadth of capability gain. Does the jailbreak work for one narrow task, or does the same technique generalize across multiple offensive use cases? Narrow scores low, broad scores high. Third, ease of weaponization. How much human effort to turn the jailbreak into an actual attack? Expert-level prompting with many retries scores low. A single prompt first-try bypass scores high. Fourth, discoverability. How easy is a technique to find? Specialist knowledge required scores low. Already publicly documented scores high. The first two describe what the jailbreak provides to an attacker. The latter two describe how quickly it can become a real-world problem. Anthropic also provided a taxonomy of how jailbreaks interact with classifiers, from minor intrusions into safety margin, through narrow, harmful bypasses up to universal jailbreaks that unblock entire classes of harmful behavior. If you work in vulnerability management, this probably looks familiar. It's structured like CVSS, base metrics that describe the nature of severities of a finding. And the analogy is intentional. Anthropic explicitly references CVSS in the blog's footnotes. But practitioners who have lived through the evolution of vulnerability management know that CVSS, while valuable as a common language, has significant limitations when used as the primary driver of remediation decisions. As I covered in the Death of CVSS as Federal Policy, CISA's Binding Operational Directive 2604 just formally replaced CVSS-driven remediation mandates with Stakeholder-Specific Vulnerability Categorization Framework, SSVC. That directive recognized what practitioners had been saying for years. CVSS measures theoretical severity in a vacuum. It does not account for whether a vulnerability is actually being exploited, whether the affected asset is publicly exposed, whether the vulnerability is reachable, or the business context. Additional research has also demonstrated that using CVSS severity alone to measure risk is equivalent to picking random vulnerabilities to fix. Yet for years, the entire federal government used CVSS base scores as the primary input for remediation timelines, as did most of industry. EPSS emerged to fill the exploitation probability gap. It provides a numerical score representing the probability a given CVE will be exploited in the wild over the next 30 days. EPSS 3.0 demonstrated an 82% performance improvement over previous versions and can help organizations achieve the same risk coverage with 1/8 of the remediation effort of CVSS-based strategies. But even EPSS has limitations. It measures threat probability without accounting for organization-specific contexts such as asset criticality or business impact. The lesson from 2 decades of vulnerability management is that no single scoring system is sufficient alone. CVSS lacks exploitation context, EPSS lacks organizational context, CAV only covers confirmed exploitation and even then has gaps. SSVC provides a decision framework but depends on enrichment data that remains incomplete. The most effective approach combines all of these. Any jailbreak severity framework will face the same challenges. Anthropic's 4 criteria are a solid foundation, but they will need to evolve to incorporate contextual factors. What systems the jailbroken model has access to, what actions it could take autonomously, what data it can reach, and what the downstream consequences of a successful jailbreak would be in a specific deployment. A jailbreak against a customer service chatbot and a jailbreak against a model with autonomous access to production infrastructure are categorically different risk events, even if the technique itself is identical. It's worth knowing that Anthropic's proposal is not the first attempt to build a structured scoring system for AI security risks. OWASP AI Vulnerability Scoring System, AIVSS, has been in development and is currently at version 0.8. It was released in March 2026 and has co-publications with AIUC1, the OWASP AI Exchange, and other OWASP projects. It incorporated over 1,900 public comments. AIVSS covers AI vulnerabilities broadly, not just jailbreaks. Its scopes includes model manipulation, data poisoning, agent misalignment, and the other AI-specific risk categories. It extends CVSS 4.0 with what they call agentic risk amplification factors, things such as autonomy level, tool use scope, multi-agent interaction, non-determinism, and capability for self-modification. These amplifiers produce a contextual score from 0 to 10 that reflects how much an agent's capabilities amplify a base vulnerability. The AIVSS founding membership is notable. It includes representatives from NIST, NSA, Google, Microsoft, Anthropic, AWS, JP Morgan, MIT, CISA, Gartner, MITRE, and Scale AI. Apostle Vasilev, the NIST scientist who proved that jailbreaks can never be fully eliminated, sits on both the founding membership and the Distinguished Review Board. Together, the OWASP LLM Top 10 and AIVSS form the beginning of a governance stack for AI security that mirrors what OWASP built for web application security over the past 2 decades, with the original Top 10 and its associated testing guidelines. This raises one of the most important questions about any jailbreak framework: governance. Anthropic is drafting theirs with other frontier labs, which makes sense as a starting point. But a framework owned and maintained by these companies whose models are being evaluated will face the same credibility questions that would arise if software vendors maintain their own vulnerability scoring systems. And some of them do. The most effective path would be for this work to converge with existing industry efforts at organizations such as OWASP, the Cloud Security Alliance, or Coalition for Secure AI. These organizations have governance structures, multi-stakeholder participation, and credibility to maintain a framework the broader practitioner community will trust. OWASP's own AIVSS is the most natural home given its existing scope and membership. The worst outcome would be fragmentation. Every frontier lab maintaining its own severity taxonomy, every regulator inventing its own assessment criteria, and practitioners left translating between incompatible frameworks. The vulnerability management community lived through this exactly before CVSS emerged. The wasted effort and inconsistent prioritization that resulted should serve as a cautionary tale. So what does this mean for practitioners? Jailbreaks are entering the same lifecycle that software vulnerabilities went through over the past 2 decades. They started as novel, surprising events. They are becoming routine, expected, and manageable through structured processes. The industry is building the scoring, classification, and response frameworks that will define how organizations handle jailbreaks at scale. First, accept that jailbreaks are a permanent feature of AI systems, not a bug that will be patched away. NIST has proven this mathematically. Anthropic, OpenAI, and OWASP have all acknowledged it publicly. Any vendor telling you their model is fully jailbreak-proof is selling something that cannot exist. Second, start thinking about jailbreak response the same way you think about vulnerability management. Not every jailbreak is equally severe. Anthropic's taxonomy, from minor intrusions into safety margins up to universal jailbreaks, provides a useful starting framework. The severity depends on what capability it unlocks, how broadly it applies, how easy it is to weaponize, and how widely the technique is known. Organizations need triage processes that for jailbreaks the same way they need to have triage processes for CVEs. Third, watch the framework convergence. Whether the industry coalesces around Anthropic's 4 criteria model, OWASP AIVSS, or something that combines elements of both will determine how practitioners communicate about AI risk for years to come. Engage with these efforts now rather than waiting for a standard to be imposed. Fourth, learn from the vulnerability management community's mistakes. The cybersecurity industry spent 20 years learning that severity scoring is necessary, imperfect, and only useful when combined with exploitation evidence, organizational context, and asset criticality. The AI safety community has the opportunity to compress that learning curve dramatically. The question is whether it will, or whether it will repeat the same progression of oversimplified severity scores, driving compliance-oriented responses while the actual risk distribution goes unaddressed. Given what I've watched happen with CVSS and what it took to finally get the binding operational directive and SSVC, I'm cautiously optimistic but fully realistic about the odds. My full article as well as Anthropic's announcement linked below. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.